In the spring of 1978, the quiet desert community of Barstow, California, was unsettled by the mysterious disappearance of 16-year-old Lisa Martinez. She had vanished without a trace on Highway 95, leaving behind only skid marks and scattered belongings in the endless expanse of sand and sagebrush. But 6 years later, when Detective Maria Hernandez stumbles upon a single roadside assistance receipt buried among the evidence, she uncovers a truth so devastating it would unravel the very fabric of a family's trust and lead to the most horrifying revelation imaginable. The asphalt stretched endlessly under the merciless Nevada sun that April morning when Lisa Martinez should have arrived in Las Vegas. Her powder blue Volkswagen Bug never reached the Sahara Hotel where her senior class waited. Instead, Highway Patrol Officer Jim Bradley found himself standing beside a lonely stretch of road staring at 23 feet of black rubber burned into the pavement. The skid marks told a story of sudden violent braking. They began straight and purposeful, then curved sharply to the right before disappearing into the sandy shoulder. Scattered around the impact site lay the remnants of a young life interrupted a red vinyl purse. Its contents spilled across the gravel. A single white tennis shoelace is still tied. Pages from what appeared to be a spiral notebook fluttering in the desert wind like wounded birds. Officer Bradley knelt beside the purse, careful not to disturb the scene. Lisa's driver's license photo smiled up at him. Dark eyes bright with possibility, long black hair caught in a moment of laughter. $17 in cash remained untouched inside the wallet, along with a folded piece of paper bearing an address in Las Vegas and the words, "Senior Trip 1978, written in careful cursive. The desert held its secrets close. No witnesses traveled this desolate stretch of highway in the pre-dawn hours. No one saw what happened to Lisa Martinez or her cheerful little car. The only sounds were the whisper of wind through the Joshua trees and the distant rumble of an 18-wheeler disappearing into the heat shimmer. As the sun climbed higher, Officer Bradley radioed for the crime scene team. He had no way of knowing that this case would consume investigators for years, or that the truth lay not in the obvious places they would search, but in the shadows cast by those who appeared most helpful. The desert had swallowed Lisa Martinez whole, but it would eventually give up its secrets. Detective Maria Hernandez pulled the cardboard file box from the evidence storage shelf, feeling the weight of 6 years of unanswered questions. The Martinez case had been passed between 3 different investigators, each one adding their theories and frustrations to the growing collection of reports. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she settled at her desk, the familiar scent of coffee and old paper filling the small office. The initial investigation had cast a wide net, but 3 names surfaced repeatedly in the witness statements and police reports. Each man had inserted himself into Lisa Martinez's life in ways that made seasoned detectives' skin crawl. Each possessed clear motives and disturbing behavioral patterns that pointed toward violence. Rick Castellanos occupied the thickest section of the file. Lisa's ex-boyfriend had been unable to accept their breakup 3 months before her disappearance. Teachers at Barstow High reported seeing him lurking near Lisa's locker following her between classes despite repeated warnings from the principal. Her best friend Sandra Villarreal had provided a detailed statement about Rick's increasingly erratic behavior, the late-night phone calls, the flowers left on Lisa's car windshield, the way he would appear wherever she happened to be. Wade Thompson presented a different kind of menace. The 52-year-old owner of Thompson's Gas and Auto had a reputation for making young female customers uncomfortable with his lingering stares and inappropriate comments. Several girls from Lisa's school had complained about his behavior. The gas station sat directly on Lisa's route to Las Vegas, positioned like a spider in its web. Danny Morrison remained the most enigmatic figure. The 24-year-old drifter had been hitchhiking through Barstow for several weeks before Lisa's disappearance. Witnesses described seeing them talking at least twice, once outside the library, another time near the school parking lot. Danny claimed he was trying to help young women avoid dangerous situations, but his intensity made people nervous. Maria opened Lisa's school records and found another name mentioned frequently, Miguel Santos, the family's trusted mechanic who had serviced the Martinez vehicles for over a decade. His statements were brief, professional, helpful. He had checked Lisa's Volkswagen just 2 weeks before her trip, ensuring it was roadworthy for the desert drive. A good man, according to everyone who knew him. She made a note to re-interview him. Maria spread Rick Castellanos' file across her desk, the photographs and witness statements painting a portrait of obsession that made her stomach turn. The 19-year-old had transformed from Lisa's devoted boyfriend into something far more sinister after she ended their relationship in January 1978. The harassment had begun immediately. Sandra Villarreal's statement described how Rick would wait in his rusted Camaro outside Lisa's house every morning, revving the engine until she emerged for school. He followed her car at a distance, always staying just within the legal limits, but close enough to make his presence known. When Lisa changed her route, Rick adapted. When she asked friends for rides, he followed them too. The threats escalated in February. Lisa had confided to her counselor, Mrs. Patterson, that Rick had cornered her after chemistry class. His exact words, recorded in the counselor's notes, sent a chill through Maria. "You think you can just throw away what we had? You belong to me, Lisa. You'll always belong to me." His hands had gripped her shoulders hard enough to leave bruises. A restraining order filed in March revealed the depth of Rick's desperation. Lisa's mother, Carmen Martinez, had documented 23 incidents of unwanted contact. Phone calls at all hours with heavy breathing, dead roses left on their doorstep. Rick's face pressed against their kitchen window one night watching the family eat dinner. The police had warned him twice, but the behavior continued. Most disturbing was the testimony from Lisa's friend Janet Morrison, no relation to the hitchhiker Danny. She reported overhearing Rick talking to his friend Tony Guerrero behind the school gymnasium. "She's not going to Vegas without me," Rick had said, his voice tight with rage. "I'll make sure of that." Janet had noted the date in her diary, April 10th, just 5 days before Lisa's disappearance. Maria studied the timeline again. Rick's alibi was weak. He claimed to be home sleeping when Lisa left at 4 a.m., but he lived alone in a studio apartment behind his uncle's auto repair shop. No one could verify his whereabouts. His Camaro showed fresh scrapes on the front bumper when police examined it 3 days later, though Rick claimed he'd hit a jackrabbit. The evidence seemed overwhelming, yet something nagged at Maria. She flipped through the witness statements again, noting how many people had mentioned Miguel Santos in passing, always helpfully, always concerned. The mechanic had even offered to search the desert himself when Lisa first went missing. Good Samaritans, in Maria's experience, sometimes had their own secrets. Wade Thompson's gas station occupied a strategic position on Highway 95, the last reliable stop before the long stretch of desert that led to Las Vegas. Maria drove there on a Tuesday morning, studying the layout with fresh eyes. The building squatted like a concrete toad beside the highway, its twin gas pumps casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. The evidence against Wade painted him as a predator who used his business to identify vulnerable targets. 7 different young women had filed complaints about his behavior over the past 2 years. The pattern was consistent and disturbing, lingering touches when handling payment comments about their appearances, requests for phone numbers under the guise of checking on their cars later. 17-year-old Monica Vasquez had provided the most detailed account. Wade had insisted on checking under her hood despite her protests that the car was running fine. He'd positioned himself behind her, pressing close enough that she could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. "Pretty girl like you shouldn't be driving alone," he'd whispered near her ear. "Dangerous things happen to pretty girls out here." Lisa had stopped at Thompson's Gas regularly on her weekend trips to visit her aunt in Las Vegas. Wade's logbook showed her Volkswagen had been serviced there twice in March, just weeks before her disappearance. Both times, Wade had been working alone. The most damning evidence came from Wade's own behavior after Lisa vanished. Instead of expressing concern like other community members, he'd seemed almost excited by the investigation. He'd approached multiple reporters eager to share his theories about what might have happened. "Young girls today don't understand how dangerous the world is," he'd told Channel 8 News. "They think they're invincible." Maria found his statement to police particularly unsettling. Wade claimed Lisa had seemed nervous and distracted during her last visit, but he'd provided details about her appearance and behavior that seemed unusually specific for a routine gas purchase. He'd noticed she was wearing a yellow sundress, had mentioned her hair was in a ponytail, recalled that she'd checked her watch repeatedly. Yet something felt rehearsed about Wade's account, almost too perfect. Maria made a note to check his business records more thoroughly. She also wanted to speak with Miguel Santos again. The mechanic had mentioned seeing Wade talking intensely with someone in a yellow dress the week before Lisa disappeared, though he'd seemed uncertain about the details. Danny Morrison had drifted into Barstow like tumbleweeds blown in from the desert, carrying nothing but a worn duffel bag and a disturbing philosophy about saving young women from themselves. Maria reviewed his file with growing unease, noting the pattern of behavior that had alarmed multiple witnesses in the weeks before Lisa's disappearance. The 24-year-old claimed to be traveling to California to find work, but he'd lingered in Barstow far longer than necessary. Local business owners remembered him as polite but intense, with pale blue eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. He'd taken odd jobs around town, sweeping floors at the diner, unloading trucks at the hardware store, helping Miguel Santos organize inventory at the auto parts shop. Danny's interactions with young women followed a troubling pattern. He positioned himself as their protector, warning them about dangerous men, while simultaneously inserting himself into their lives. Sarah Henderson, a junior at Barstow High, reported that Danny had approached her outside the library, claiming he'd seen bad men watching her. He'd offered to walk her home, growing agitated when she declined. The connection to Lisa was more complex. According to multiple witnesses, they'd spoken at least 3 times. Danny had approached her in the school parking lot, warning her about men who prey on innocent girls. He'd appeared at the diner where she worked part-time, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours while watching her serve customers. Most concerning, he'd been seen near her house the evening before her disappearance, standing under a streetlight across from the Martinez home. His statement to police revealed a disturbing worldview. Danny spoke of young women as fragile creatures who needed protection from a corrupt world. He'd rambled about his mission to save girls before they make mistakes that destroy their purity. When pressed about Lisa specifically, his answers became evasive. He remembered her as special and different from the others, but claimed he'd tried to warn her about unspecified dangers. Miguel Santos had provided crucial testimony about Danny's behavior at the auto shop. The mechanic reported that Danny had asked detailed questions about car maintenance, particularly about brake systems and how mechanical failures might cause accidents. Miguel had found the questions odd, but hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now, reviewing the case with fresh perspective, Maria wondered if Miguel's observations held more significance than anyone had realized. Miguel Santos stood in the doorway of his cluttered auto shop, wiping grease from his hands with a red cloth as Maria approached. The 55-year-old mechanic had serviced the Martinez family vehicles for 12 years, earning their trust through honest work and fair prices. His reputation in the Hispanic community was spotless, a devout family man who attended St. Joseph's Catholic Church every Sunday with his wife Elena and their 3 grown children. The shop occupied a corner lot on Barstow's east side, its hand-painted sign promising honest work, fair prices in both English and Spanish. Inside, the familiar scents of motor oil and metal shavings filled the air. Miguel moved through the space with practiced efficiency, pointing out where Lisa's Volkswagen had been parked during her final service appointment on April 1st. "She was such a good girl," Miguel said, his accented English heavy with genuine sorrow. "Always polite, always said thank you. The whole family, they trusted me with their cars." He pulled out a work order, his careful handwriting documenting the oil change and brake inspection he'd performed on Lisa's Bug. Everything had been in perfect condition for her Las Vegas trip. Miguel's testimony had been invaluable during the initial investigation. He'd provided crucial details about the 3 suspicious men, having observed each of them around town in the weeks before Lisa's disappearance. He'd seen Rick Castellanos arguing with Lisa outside the post office, noticed Wade Thompson acting strangely at the parts supply store, and worked alongside Danny Morrison for several days when the drifter helped organize inventory. "That Danny, he asked too many questions about cars," Miguel explained, shaking his head. "How brakes work, what makes engines fail. I thought maybe he wanted to learn the trade, but now..." He trailed off, crossing himself reflexively. Most helpful had been Miguel's observation about Lisa's final week. He'd noticed her car parked at unusual times and places outside the library on Tuesday evening, at the grocery store Wednesday afternoon, when she should have been at work. She seemed nervous, always looking over her shoulder, he told Maria. I worried someone was bothering her. Maria made notes appreciating Miguel's detailed observations. His memory was remarkably sharp about that final week, almost as if he'd been paying special attention to Lisa's movements. She filed that thought away, probably just a concerned family friend being extra watchful. As she prepared to leave, Miguel handed her his business card. If you need anything else, detective, anything to help find who hurt that sweet girl. 6 years after Lisa Martinez vanished, trucker Ben Kowalski was relieving himself behind a sand dune 30 miles east of Barstow, when his boot struck something metallic. The desert had shifted and settled through countless windstorms, exposing the curved edge of what looked like a car bumper beneath the sand. The excavation took 3 days. Highway patrol officers and volunteer searchers used shovels and brushes to carefully uncover Lisa's powder blue Volkswagen Bug, its paint faded but still recognizable. The car had been buried, deliberately positioned in a natural depression between dunes and covered with sand and debris. Someone had taken considerable time and effort to hide it. Maria stood beside the excavated vehicle, watching the crime scene team catalog each piece of evidence. The car's interior had been preserved by the dry desert air, creating a time capsule of Lisa's final moments. Her overnight bags sat in the back seat, clothes still neatly folded. A thermos of coffee, long since dried to powder, remained in the cup holder. The most significant discoveries came from the glove compartment and beneath the driver's seat. Lisa's diary, bound in pink leather, contained increasingly frantic entries about the 3 men who had been tormenting her. Rick's threatening letters were folded inside the back cover, 7 pages of escalating rage and possessive rants. You can't hide from me forever, one letter concluded. We belong together, and if I can't have you, nobody can. Wade Thompson's business card was tucked behind the sun visor, but someone had written disturbing notes on the back in pencil. Follows young girls. Knows their schedules. And a crude map showing routes between the gas station and various locations around town. The handwriting appeared to match samples from Lisa's school notebooks. Most chilling were the photographs scattered across the floor on the passenger side, dozens of candid shots showing Lisa at school, at work, walking to her car. The images had been taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, capturing her unaware. On the back of several photos, someone had written, "My angel," and "soon," in block letters. Mixed among the obvious evidence, Maria noticed a crumpled roadside assistance receipt wedged under the passenger seat. The signature at the bottom read, Santos, but the handwriting looked different from Miguel's usual careful script, more hurried, less precise. She bagged the receipt with the other evidence, though it seemed insignificant compared to the damning material that pointed so clearly toward the 3 primary suspects. Maria sat in her office late that evening, Lisa's pink diary open under the harsh fluorescent light. The entries from March and April 1978 painted a portrait of escalating terror that made her hands tremble as she turned each page. Lisa's careful cursive had grown increasingly erratic as the threats intensified her words, sometimes pressing so hard into the paper that they tore through to the other side. March 15th. Rick followed me to work again today. He sat in his car across from the diner for 2 hours, just staring. When I got off my shift, he was gone, but there were dead roses on my windshield. I'm scared to tell Mom because she'll just worry more. March 22nd. Wade made me really uncomfortable today when I stopped for gas. He kept finding excuses to touch my hand when I paid, and he asked if I had a boyfriend. When I said no, he smiled in this creepy way and said, "Good girls like you need protection." I'm going to start getting gas somewhere else. March 28th. Danny appeared outside the library again. He says he's worried about me, that he's seen dangerous men watching me. But he's the one who makes me feel unsafe. The way he stares like he's memorizing everything about me. He offered to walk me home and got angry when I said no. His whole face changed. The final entries were the most disturbing. Lisa had documented a series of escalating incidents that made all 3 men appear capable of violence. April 8th. Found Rick waiting by my car after school. He grabbed my arm so tight it left bruises and said I was making a mistake by ignoring him. He knows about my Vegas trip somehow. How does he know? April 10th. Wade called the house tonight. I don't know how he got our number. He said he'd heard I was planning a trip and offered to check my car for free. Something about his voice made my skin crawl. Mom thinks he's just being helpful, but I can't shake the feeling he's planning something. April 12th. Danny cornered me at the diner today. He kept talking about how I needed to be saved from making bad choices. He said Vegas was full of predators who would hurt me. Then he whispered that he had dreams about me, about keeping me safe. I wanted to scream. The final entry was dated April 14th, just hours before her disappearance. I can't take this anymore. Someone's been watching the house at night. I see shadows moving outside my window. Tomorrow, I'm leaving early before anyone expects me to go. Miguel checked my car yesterday and said everything looks perfect for the trip. At least I can trust him. Maria returned to the evidence room the following morning, drawn back to the roadside assistance receipt that had nagged at her through a restless night. She spread Miguel Santos' statements and work orders across the table, comparing his handwriting to the hurried signature on the crumpled paper found in Lisa's car. The discrepancies were subtle but unmistakable. Miguel's usual signature flowed with practiced confidence, the M elaborate the Santos ending with a distinctive flourish. The receipt signature appeared cramped nervous, with the S in Santos trailing off as if the writer had been interrupted or distracted. More puzzling was the service code printed on the receipt: emergency roadside assistance, brake failure. The timestamp showed 4:47 a.m. on April 15, 1978, less than an hour after Lisa had left Barstow for Las Vegas. But Miguel had told investigators he'd been asleep at home when Lisa disappeared, and his work logs showed no emergency calls that morning. Maria pulled Miguel's business records from the case files. His standard roadside assistance receipts were pre-printed with his shop's information, but this receipt came from a generic pad, the kind sold at auto parts stores. The paper was cheaper, yellowed with age, and bore no business logo or address. She studied the timeline again. Lisa had left her house at 4:15 a.m., planning to drive straight through to Las Vegas before the desert heat became unbearable. The receipt suggested her car had experienced brake problems within 30 minutes of departure somewhere along Highway 95. But the skid marks found at the scene indicated her brakes had worked perfectly, at least initially. The phone rang, interrupting her analysis. Carmen Martinez's voice was strained with grief and hope. "Detective Hernandez, I've been thinking about something. The night before Lisa left, Miguel called the house. He said he'd forgotten to check something on her car and wanted to look at it one more time. Lisa drove over there around 10 o'clock. She seemed fine when she came back, said everything was perfect." Maria made careful notes. Miguel hadn't mentioned this additional service call in any of his statements. She flipped through his work orders again, finding no record of Lisa's car being serviced on April 14th evening. Mrs. Martinez, did Lisa say anything specific about what Miguel checked? Just that he was being extra careful because of the long drive. Such a good man, always looking out for our family. After hanging up, Maria stared at the receipt again. The evidence against Rick, Wade, and Danny remained overwhelming. But this small piece of paper whispered a different story. Maria decided to dig deeper into Miguel Santos's background, starting with his business records and expanding outward. What she discovered over the next 48 hours shattered everything she thought she knew about the case. The first red flag appeared in Miguel's customer files. Over the past 3 years, he'd serviced vehicles for 17 different young women between the ages of 16 and 22, an unusually high concentration for a neighborhood auto shop. Most were referrals with no clear connection to his established customer base. Maria cross-referenced the names with missing persons reports and found something that made her blood run cold. 4 of these women had disappeared within 6 months of visiting Miguel's shop. The disappearances had occurred in different jurisdictions across Southern California and Nevada, preventing investigators from recognizing the pattern. Jennifer Walsh, 19, vanished from Riverside in 1976 after her car was serviced at Miguel's shop during a family visit to Barstow. Tracy Coleman, 18, disappeared from Las Vegas in 1977. Her mother's phone records showed calls to Miguel's shop inquiring about transmission work. 2 others had similar connections. Miguel's financial records revealed another troubling pattern. Despite his modest auto repair business, he'd made several large cash deposits over the past 2 years. The amounts ranged from $3,000 to $8,000, far more than a small-town mechanic should generate. Bank surveillance footage showed Miguel making these deposits alone, always in cash, always appearing nervous. The breakthrough came when Maria contacted the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office in Los Angeles. Agent Roberto Vega recognized Miguel's name immediately. "We've been investigating a trafficking network that moves young women from California through Nevada to Mexico," he explained. "The operation targets girls who won't be missed immediately, runaways, those estranged from families, college students traveling alone. We suspected someone in the Barstow area was identifying potential victims, but we could never pin down who." Agent Vega faxed over surveillance photos taken near the Mexican border. In 3 separate images, Miguel Santos could be seen near vehicles matching the descriptions of cars driven by missing women. He appeared to be conducting what looked like routine mechanical inspections, but the timing coincided with the women's disappearances. The final piece came from Miguel's shop insurance records. He'd filed a claim in May 1978 for damaged tools and equipment, claiming vandalism had occurred overnight. But the police report showed no signs of forced entry, and Miguel had declined to prosecute, saying he didn't want trouble for his family. The timing was significant exactly 3 weeks after Lisa Martinez disappeared. Maria sat across from Miguel Santos in the small interview room, the roadside assistance receipt and bank records spread between them like a bridge spanning 6 years of lies. Miguel's weathered hands rested calmly on the metal table, but she noticed the slight tremor in his fingers when he reached for the water cup. "The night before Lisa disappeared, she came to your shop." Maria began, her voice steady and professional. "You told her mother you needed to check something on her car, but there's no record of that service call in your books." Miguel's expression remained placid, concerned. "Sometimes I forget to write things down, Detective. It was late, just a quick check. I wanted to make sure she'd be safe on that long desert drive." "Safe?" Maria let the word hang in the air. "Like Jennifer Walsh needed to be safe, or Tracy Coleman?" She watched his face carefully as she spoke the names. A muscle twitched near his left eye. "I don't know those names." "Your customer files say otherwise." Maria opened the folder, revealing copies of work orders bearing Miguel's signature. "Jennifer's transmission worked on 3 days before she disappeared. Tracy's brake system serviced the week before she vanished in Las Vegas." The silence stretched between them. Miguel's breathing had become slightly more labored, but his hands remained steady. He was practiced at this, Maria realized. How many other conversations like this had he navigated over the years? "You positioned yourself perfectly," she continued. "Trusted family friend, respected businessman, pillar of the community. Young women would drive right into your shop, tell you their travel plans, trust you with their safety. And when they disappeared, you were there to comfort their families, to offer help with the investigation." Miguel's facade finally cracked. "You don't understand what those girls were getting into. The world out there, it would have destroyed them. I was protecting them." "Protecting them?" Maria's voice hardened. "By selling them to traffickers, by burying Lisa Martinez in the desert when she figured out what you were doing. Lisa wasn't supposed to..." Miguel stopped himself, realizing he'd revealed too much. "Wasn't supposed to what?" "Discover your operation threatened to expose you." Maria leaned forward. "She trusted you, Miguel. She came to you for help, and you killed her for it." Miguel Santos looked down at his hands, the weight of 6 years and 4 dead girls finally pressing down on his shoulders. Miguel Santos's confession unfolded like a roadmap through hell, each revelation more devastating than the last. He spoke in a monotone voice, as if recounting someone else's crimes rather than his own. The trafficking operation had been elegant in its simplicity. Miguel identified vulnerable young women through his legitimate business, learning their travel plans and personal circumstances. He would disable their vehicles along remote stretches of highway, then appear as their rescuer. Most girls were grateful when the trusted family mechanic offered to help, never suspecting they were walking into a trap. Lisa was different. Miguel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Smart. Too smart. When I disabled her brakes that night, she should have called me for help like the others. Instead, she managed to control the car to stop safely. She hid in the desert and watched me arrive." Lisa had seen Miguel plant evidence at the scene: Rick's threatening letter, Wade's business card, Danny's photographs. She'd confronted him when he found her crouched behind a Joshua tree, demanding to know why he was trying to frame innocent men. She figured it out so quickly. Miguel continued. The other missing girls, my real business. She said she was going to tell everyone that she'd trusted me and I'd betrayed her family. His hand trembled as he reached for the water again. I couldn't let her destroy everything. My family, they depend on me. The money. The murder had been quick, efficient. Miguel had experience from his years moving human cargo. He'd staged Lisa's car as if she'd been abducted from the roadside, then buried both vehicle and body in the desert. The evidence he'd planted ensured investigators would focus on the three obvious suspects while he played the role of concerned family friend. You attended her funeral, Maria said, disgust evident in her voice. You comforted her mother. Miguel nodded, tears finally appearing in his eyes. Carmen trusted me. They all trusted me. As they led Miguel Santos away in handcuffs, Maria thought about the Martinez family and the closure they would finally receive. She looked at the roadside assistance receipt one last time. The real journey was just beginning for everyone involved. In the end, that was the lesson: evil might hide behind familiar faces, but truth and justice endure. As Maria walked toward her car, she squeezed the case file tighter. The healing would take time, but justice had finally been served.
Thank you for listening to Brody's Stories. Until we meet again.